Hey, greetings everybody. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we finished off Mulgore with our shaman who, minus one little mistake I made. I can't remember how it is I died with him, but he's a pretty solid character, the Tauren shaman. Finished off Mulgore. At the end of that one, I did have to wait for an elite rare to spawn, but it actually wasn't that bad once I came back and basically I think I had to kind of run his spawn route, his pat route, 2 or 3 times, and he was there. And I saved the item that starts the quest. So on his next episode, when he goes and explores Mulgore, we'll also do that quest. We've also been reading the Lands of Mystery Dungeons and Dragons campaign source book, based in the World of Warcraft setting, written from the perspective of Bran Bronzebeard, and we read about the Murloc society, community, beliefs, whatever. We're going to wrap up the last race they discuss in this book, or kind of how to make a monster race into a player character with the Nerubians. So stay a while and listen. I encountered numerous species in my travels through Azeroth: orcs, humans, gnomes, trolls, scorpions, and murlocs, among many others. However, Azeroth hides a new surprise under every stone, like a vein of unknown metals discovered in a lode. One of the most unexpected surprises was my encounter with a race of arachnid creatures. On my trip to Kalimdor, while milling around in the goblin bazaars of Gadgetstan, I met a trader who gave me the opportunity to present myself to Nerubians, which he calls spider striders, without the specter of certain death rearing its grisly head. Recently, the little goblin had looted the corpse of an explorer, a human female of unknown origin, who had taken several artifacts from the Scourge. There was also a spider silk scroll on her body, a letter from a Nerubian spider lord that promised her safe conduct through Nerubian lands and excellent compensation for the artifacts. "So why didn't you take the opportunity to present yourself to them and make a tidy profit?" I asked the goblin. His only response was a nervous, high-pitched laugh, as blood-curdling as any I've ever heard from a goblin's throat. To the nether with the little coward, I thought. Yes, I know I was being arrogant, blithely assuming that I could safely travel where the goblins refused to go, but something else prodded my decision to buy the artifacts and take the explorer's place. First, she sounded like a brave woman, and bravery creates a debt that must be honored. Second, such miraculous opportunities to do great things are rare, less so for people like myself, but still rare, and must be treated like gifts from the light, or the Titans, or whatever your preference. I vowed that when I found myself in Northrend, I would use this opportunity to become the first known member of the Alliance to travel peacefully into a Nerubian community and live to tell the tale. After numerous adventures, some described elsewhere in these pages, I found myself on the southern shores of Northrend, unharmed and eager to attend to the Nerubian mission. The letter told me to seek a great monolithic black stone, its top cracked and peeled by some unnatural force, so it jutted like a huge Y rune out of the ice. After several days of numb fingers and bone-chill feet searching in the icelands, with only dwarven potables to sustain me, I found the stone. I waited several hours for a chance encounter, then decided to climb the monolith to get a better vantage point, and discovered a hollow spot on one of the rock faces. My half-frozen fingers searched for a keyhole, and finally found one, and after working the lock for 5 minutes, the rock face swung open, revealing a secret passage. Now we came to the true test. I have to confess that at that moment the goblin didn't seem like such a coward after all. A narrow staircase composed of hardened spider silk spiraled down into the darkness. The passages were blocked with webs, fibers thick as leather, which I needed to work with a steel dagger to cut. They gave way with a sudden whooshing sound that wasn't the wind. A warning, perhaps. But no, I was no skulker. I wanted them to find me, so I entered. After a long descent, shadows started to flicker in the faint light beneath me, and I heard a familiar sound, an army rousing in the dark. "I bear tokens against the Scourge," I repeated, the words which were etched on the scroll. "Hasu Asnab commands that you permit me safe passage. I carry his seal." The light at the bottom of the stairs flared, and I could see figures climbing the stairs in an elegant, almost silent manner. Now I could see how the Nerubians had earned their reputation as assassins. Within seconds, I was facing 6 spears brandished by bizarre-looking creatures. Take a spider's torso, crown it with the upper body of a dark-skinned human with pitted skin and claw-like pincers for hands, cover the human half with chitin, and you might come close to an accurate description. Greetings. I dangled the letter in the hopes that someone who looked remotely like a captain would acknowledge it and speak common. Nice spears. Let's talk. One of the creatures took the letter, read the writing that I could barely decipher, and eventually we came to an understanding. I would trade the artifacts in exchange for 6 days and nights spent living among them, and safe passage. A warrior named Mihal and a seer named Ultomon would be my guides and answer my questions to the best of their ability. Hopefully, by observing the denizens of the sundered monolith in close quarters, I would learn the true nature of these alien creatures. Description. Once the Nerubians maintained the greatest civilization on Northrend, beautiful and cultured, but by some local accounts cruel. Ajol Nerub seemed unconquerable until the coming of the Scourge. Nerjul descended upon them and broke their cities. He stole their lands, their lore, and even their bodies in the pursuit of his obscene corpse dreams. A few queens escaped the fall of Ajol Nerub and scattered across Northrend. However, the race of vigorous philosophers was no more. Now a typical Nerubian lives out his life, performs his duties, and then dies, often in violence, without advancement or hope. One emotion still drives them. Every Nerubian knows that the Scourge has wronged them, and that the war between their kind and the Lich King is a struggle without end. I don't entirely disapprove of this mentality. Although not a warm or pleasant race, they honored their agreements and showed no particular contempt toward me or my kind. To be sure, they would make strange allies for the Alliance, but allies they could become given our mutual enemy. Many remember what they've lost and are eager to reclaim what was stolen from them. There are so many cool races that could be playable characters if we could get past the inability to ride mounts as a barrier. So we need only bipedals, it sucks. Appearance. Nerubians resemble humanoid arachnid hybrids. A Nerubian has the lower body of a spider and a smaller humanoid upper body. Nerubians have pincer-like claws instead of hands, which they use with consummate skill. They handle complex tools with no difficulty. Nerubians have a caste-based society, and their size depends heavily on the diet assigned to their caste. The average worker averages 10 feet in height fully standing, with a spider body roughly 8 feet in diameter. Warriors are larger, ranging between 10 feet and 12 feet tall and 10 feet in diameter. Seers are larger still, reaching almost 15 feet in height and 13 feet in diameter. Watching a Nerubian raise itself from a crouch to its full measure is a daunting sight. Spider lords are considerably different from typical Nerubians. They can be enormous, reaching upward of 18 feet in height and 20 feet in diameter. They also have a carapace typically covered black with dull red markings, and dual sets of wings, giving their lower torsos a beetle-like appearance. Queens, or so I'm told, I was not permitted to meet one, are even more enormous, and the most ancient of queens can reach 40 feet in height and fill an entire cavern with their bloated bodies. I'm also told that a Nerubian's power can be safely estimated by its size, so these very large queens are also very, very powerful. Regions. Nerubians prefer to live underground, though they are comfortable in surface dwellings as well. They dwell under lands that are frozen for much of the year, but survive well in the cold. They prefer hills to plains and seem comfortable tunneling through hard mountain stone. Almost all Nerubians live in Northrend, their ancestral homeland. Faith. After several days observing the Nerubians, one thing struck me especially curious. I'd seen no temples, nor priests, nor holy warriors. I turned to Mahal and asked whether I could observe the Nerubians at worship. Worship, he wondered, rolling the common word across his tongue. What is worship? This was certainly not the reaction I expected. I questioned him further on Nerubian's spiritual beliefs. Mahal was confused. After a few minutes of bartering over terms, he came to a crude understanding of what I was asking and told me they did not care about such questions. The Nerubians had no such rituals, though perhaps the queen might know of such things. Later I broached the subject to Ultaman, the seer. By this time I figured I had picked up enough of their language to hold a complex conversation. In Ajol Nerub, he told me, where theological debates were as commonplace as any other form of battle, there were 5 or 6 schools of religious thought. Long ago, however, most sensible Nerubians came to the conclusion that worshipping creatures from beyond the world is insane. Given the intentions of most such entities toward the world, honoring them makes as much sense as a fly caught in a web worshipping the spider who is about to devour him. I laughed, if only because I could foresee priests of the light having some interesting conversations with these seers. I inquired about the queen's role. The seer answered that the sundered monolith revered her, but did not openly praise her, except when she delivered a clutch of eggs. Likewise, they revered their ancestors, but did not sacrifice to them or ask for their intervention. They did not understand the concept of holiness, though unholiness had been taught to them quite vividly by Ner'zhul. History. Few among the Nerubians know their history. For Mihal the warrior, the past was remembered only as a vague golden age. Sorry, I was just checking. Bubba, where was I? Ultimon was more forthcoming, but I discovered most of what I learned about their earlier days from the Drakari trolls. The Nerubians come from Jol Nerub in Northrend, but their true origins are much older. Once, they and another race, the Karaji, were one people, who established the empire of Ajakir that was in power long ago. The Karaji warred with the Gurubashi and Amani troll empires, and after long centuries of battle, their culture was shattered, and they were driven into exile. The Nerubians fled north. In Northrend, the Nerubians flourished. The subterranean civilization of Jol Nerub covered much of the continent. Terraced pits and tall ziggurats housed countless Nerubians who lived, worked, and contemplated the universe. Theirs was no sterile civilization. Jol Nerub contained huge libraries of literature, music, philosophy, and arcane lore. It was a golden age, except perhaps for the humans and elves they ensnared, a memory that still brings a rare, chilling smile to their faces. Then about 20 years ago, Ner'zhul descended on Northrend. The coming of an undead horde presented an undeniable threat. Elite warriors were hatched, trained, and dispatched to fight the scourge. 10 undead fell for every Nerubian who was cut down. Unfortunately, Ner'zhul could replenish his losses by raising the fallen as undead slaves, but the Nerubians could not. Even so, Nerubian resistance was fierce, and Ner'zhul finally unleashed the undead plague. In a matter of days, the civilization of Jol Nerub was broken. The philosophers were silenced, libraries burned, observatories shattered, and the surviving Nerubians fled. The scourge raised the animated corpses of the spider striders, which they called crypt fiends, to rebuild their cities, paying a cold homage to the race by stealing their architecture and arcane arts. One of the most powerful of the Nerubians, Anubarak, became Ner'zhul's undead champion. Now, Nerubians survive in scattered enclaves. The race of philosophers has fallen to a passionless existence. Society. On first glance, a Nerubian community resembles a hive of large insects. A Nerubian community has a single leader, usually a queen, a few advisors, a small guard of warriors, and then a large body of workers. Different types of Nerubians are referred to as castes, but here the resemblance to insects ends. Castes in Nerubian society do not have a sense of superiority or stigma. Caste is determined in a Nerubian's youth. Workers who show unusual physical abilities become warriors. Workers who show mental talents become seers, and those who demonstrate exceptional weaving skills become web spinners. Workers deal with the larger needs of the community: food, weaponsmithing, mining, building, and supplying the needs of the other castes. Their lives are unending labors, though they do not chafe at them. Unlike insects, Nerubian workers need to rest. In the sundered monolith, workers sleep in small nests that line the walls of great living caverns. The intellectual backbone of the community is the seers, a tightly knit sub-community of arcanists who are obsessed with preserving lore and rebuilding their lost libraries. The boldest seers are also explorers, risking the undead plague to venture into ruins and find fragments of lost knowledge. They understand the outside world better than other Nerubians and make the best diplomats. Warriors are often organized into small bands to patrol a community's defenses, though they more often serve as hunters. To assist both tasks, entrances are covered in thick gossamer barriers that are ensorcelled to rouse the community when breached. As evidenced in many talks with Mihal, warriors are a stoic lot, as driven as workers. Prominent captains and seers are elevated to Spider Lord status as a community grows. In small communities, a council of Spider Lords rules. Larger towns and cities have a more traditional structure. The leader is usually the eldest female, who is appointed queen. In Jol Nerub, there was also a king, a Nubarak. Groups formed for a specific purpose, such as a warband, a trade guild, or an aggregate of decimated families, choose leaders with proven ability. The queen's edicts are law, but her judgments are often tempered by the council of Spider Lords, and the Spider Lords do not hesitate to replace a queen whose judgment seems unwise. However, queens are revered as the keepers of ancestral memory, and no one except an entire council of spider lords acting in unison would dare to openly challenge her authority. Mentality. The Nerubian race is a cold, callous people. They rarely see beyond their predetermined roles and have little imagination. Even when they were living in Ajol Nerub, the flames of passion rarely blazed brightly in their hearts. On the other hand, it is a mistake to think of the Nerubians as mindless. They have keen intellects, and many are fluent in common as well as their own tongue, a clicking, rasping language. They often find our ideas strange and confusing, especially concerning emotions or culture. However, I've known more than a few dwarves whose single-mindedness and utilitarian nature is the Nerubians' equal, so they aren't that hard to understand. Well, on the other hand, I'd hate to think of what gnomes would think of them. Their emotionless nature also extends some protection to them against certain spells. I spoke to a couple of priests in Dalgard after my foray into the Sundered Monolith, and they described Nerubian minds as frozen. They resist our spells that focus on the mind, said one, and telepathic communication is impossible. I've attempted to do so a couple times. It's like trying to drill through layers of solid ice. The overall goal of the Nerubian civilization is survival. At best, life beneath the Sundered Monolith is precarious. They live in a cold climate with no allies and many enemies engaged in a difficult struggle to meet day-to-day needs. Many workers are gaunt and underfed and carry out their labors with a faltering gait. Yet it would be a mistake to pity them. Had I not possessed a letter of safe passage from a spider lord, I would have been captured, paralyzed, tortured, and killed for sport and meat. Their few emotions lead them towards sadism, the satiation of unrelenting hunger, and the exercise of gruesome power for power's sake. They are as dark and as twisted a people as any I have encountered. They trust no one. They might welcome the enemies of the Scourge, but because of their tendency to kill on first sight, it's difficult to prove that one is sufficient Scourge-bane to warrant joining in a common cause. Presenting suitable artifacts as gifts and utter deference to their military might persuade them to parley, but I do not recommend it except in direst of needs. Seers are the most driven members of the society as well as the most imaginative and, dare I say, human. They feel the loss of Ajol Nerub more keenly than the others, except possibly the queens, and they're the ones who most strongly wish to reclaim their heritage. As long as they hold positions of authority, they also hold to the dream that Ajol Nerub will be reborn and the Nerubians will not descend completely into barbarism. I don't like that he keeps referring to basically things that have a sort of a personification in the way that we think of it in a literary sense as human. Maybe humanoid. I don't know what would be a better word, but there's got to be something better than just calling them human, because I don't know, it kind of jars. Relations. Nerubians get along with no one. They trust no one, but true hatred is reserved for the Scourge. They have domesticated minor beasts, most notably bane spiders and many other spider varieties, that serve as pets in larger communities for food and other needs. The undead plague is a constant fear for all Nerubian enclaves. To prevent a reoccurrence of the disease, many towns kill and burn Nerubians they believe are infected with the plague. This fear hampers the efforts of seers who wish to rebuild Ajol Nerub. The Sundered Monolith is more willing to send out seers and risk exposure than most enclaves. One other matter needs to be addressed. For all their isolation, Ultimon seems remarkably knowledgeable about the peoples beyond Northrend, though he tried to hide the fact. It is more than possible that the surviving Nerubians maintain a network of spies using magic to cloak their identities. There have been rumors of wandering Nerubian necromancers in Kalimdor, and I heard tales of one such creature operating in Lordaeron. See Lands of Conflict, which was the first set before they revamped everything. Chapter 5, Dead Men's Tales. So I think that was the first brand book. This is the second. Eventually, Ultimon speculated that perhaps a few surviving Nerubians had thrown their lot in with the Scourge and become Ner'zhul's apprentices, and would die painfully when they were captured. However, I would not be surprised if some of the seers were not dabbling in necromancy in the hopes of beating the Lich King at his own game. Distinguishing characteristics. The community of the Sundered Monolith is composed of 6 levels. The topmost level is for soldiers, who provide a defensive buffer between the community and the surface. The next 3 levels are for workers, with food and water stored on the 4th level. The 5th level is reserved for seers and spider lords, while the 6th, which I was not allowed to visit, is a huge cavern that belongs to the queen and the other egg-laying females. The architecture struck me as an odd mixture of human and insect influences. There it is again. It was most insect-like in the workers' living quarters and most human-like in the library of the seers. All surfaces, including walls and ceilings, are meant to be traversed, and embroidered webs, some the product of the most skilled web spinners, are extremely beautiful, decorate many surfaces. The sundered monolith is also rich in gemstones, which are polished to perfect roundness like pearls, then mounted into facets into the webs, giving them the appearance of fine lace. As I marveled over the beauty of the webs, Ultimon informed me that they were paltry compared to those of Ajol Nerub. The web spinners of the sundered monolith are able to produce webs of two colors, light silver and dark silver. The spinners of Ajol Nerub were able to produce webs of numerous colors, woven together to form tapestry webs comparable to the hangings of Stormwind Cathedral. Through some lost art, they spun transparent and translucent webs with the properties of stained glass, and even wove webs that produced harmonious sounds when one walked on them. Though not equal to the masters of old, modern web spinners are still honored in Nerubian society. They are the engines of industry. The webs they spin have many applications. They are refined into a substance with the consistency of leather, but are far tougher and more durable. These webs are used for everything from temporary shelters, walls, and floors to scrolls and cloaks. A great deal of effort is spent producing food. I heard that the worker caste members survive on a diet of maggots and termites, which are consumed live. Higher caste members are fed a much richer diet of small mammals, also consumed live, fish, and birds. Whenever possible, game animals are penned in great underground enclosures. Some keep spiders as pets like cats. Nerubians take a cruel satisfaction from the act of hunting. I observed one unusual eating practice among the warriors. They produced a sticky but edible web line, spat venom onto it, then dipped it into several insect nests and consumed it. It was as close to a delicacy or a potent potable as the culture tolerates. Nahal told me that it was to test their constitution. I did notice that he seemed to be a lot more talkative after the meal. Magic plays an important role in day-to-day living. It is employed to help hives breed more quickly, to treat injury, to scry the lands for intruders or game, to sound alerts to danger, and to help them survive the frigid chill. Though Nerubians are naturally resistant to cold in Northrend, that is not always enough. Many of the gemstones that are made by the seers are enchanted to produce heat, and the webs in which they are set are used as magical conduits for warming the caverns. All Nerubians, even the worker caste, possess a magical stone whose Dweomer is meant to be triggered during the worst days of winter. This stone can mean the difference between an active worker and a dead frozen worker. One telltale element of Nerubian society that was not present here was an obelisk. In Ajol Nerub, Nerubians built many obelisks, great black rune-lined pillars that towered hundreds of feet above their communities, each crowned with a huge gemstone that was used as a magical conduit. These structures are the most remarkable traces of the Nerubian civilization, but any enclave which built one today would be offering an open invitation to the Scourge to invade their community. When I finally left the sundered monolith, I was determined to see one of them in person. Reluctantly, Ultimon provided me with the directions to the nearest one, and his reticence was justified when I encountered a crypt lord and came closer to losing my soul than I ever wished to come, but that's a tale for another time. Here they are fighting the Murlocs. Leaders. The following are the Nerubian leaders under the sundered monolith. Perhaps Nerubians place great store in ages, for they gave me all of theirs, and they seemed impressed by mine. Ajul Mehab is a female shaman and is the queen. She's 48. Majis Tomon is the lawgiver. He's an aristocrat who is 77. And Ultimon, the Spider Lord mage that they talked about, is the chief seer. He is 39 years old. Okay, and then they talk about how to play Nerubians as a player character, their description, their traits, some adventure hooks. Let's just take a peek at those before we flip by. Just scanning through them. Some trolls. Discover a Nerubian warband. One of the PC's familiars strays and gets caught in a web. Can they rescue it before it's eaten by Nerubians? Bane spiders start popping up everywhere, and they discover a magic portal to Northrend in a Nerubian community. And after they get the trust of a Nerubian enclave, they have to find an exiled necromancer, and then decide, are they going to fight him and kill him or work with him? Okay, They have poison. There's the three types: worker, warrior, and seer. The large creature has the lower body of a giant spider with a humanoid torso, arms, and head. Its spider legs are long and thin, allowing it to top 10 feet when it rears up. It wields a simple though wicked-looking spear. Okay, yeah, and it just, if you look through, it really doesn't say a lot. It's really just kind of stats. There's not a huge difference. I guess it's just more like their class. Yeah, if you look at what they have described here is I don't know, it doesn't even give. I see. The Nerubian warrior and the Nerubian seer. I guess that's a Nerubian worker. The warriors are just larger and tougher, and the seers, they have mage spells. And the Sundered Monolith is the community we just read about, with 400 people buried under the ice of southeast Northrend. This community of exiles dreams of the day when the glory of their race may be restored. Naturally xenophobic, their hatred of the Scourge and desire for revenge might be enough to help a quick-witted adventurer win some much-needed aid, but if she fails, a quick death is likely to be her fate. Okay, so we're about 3/4 of the way through this book. We are done with the race chapter. We have another episode in the pipe, 5x5. I look forward to finding where we go next, and, this book has been quite long, so it's kind of overstayed its welcome a little bit for me, and I look forward to moving on to the next one. But we got another one done. I appreciate you so much for watching and listening, and I look forward to seeing you all next time on Lore of Warcraft.